The fluorescent lights hummed softly against the pristine white walls of Westbrook Private Hospital as Akira Caldwell walked down the quiet hallway. She had worked here for nearly 2 years, but today felt different. The air itself felt heavier, as if something unseen was pressing down on her shoulders. It all started with an unexpected summons from Dr. Mitchell, the head of neurology. A direct order, no explanation. As she stepped into his office, an uneasy feeling coiled in her chest like a snake. Had she done something wrong? Was she being transferred? Or worse, was someone under her care in danger? Dr. Mitchell turned to face her, his sharp gaze unreadable. "We have a patient who requires special care, but this job is not for the faint-hearted." Akira frowned. "What do you mean?" Without a word, the doctor slid a thick medical file across the desk. The cover bore a black and white newspaper clipping of a devastating car crash, and beneath the image, a name she immediately recognized. Logan Hayes, the young CEO of HayesTech, a tech industry prodigy, once a household name, but after a tragic accident a year ago, he had slipped into a coma. "His family rarely visits," Dr. Mitchell continued. "We need someone dedicated, someone who actually cares." Akira tightened her grip on the file. The weight of responsibility pressed against her, but deep down she already knew her answer. "I'll do it." The penthouse suite on the hospital's top floor was nothing like the typical sterile patient rooms. There were no harsh fluorescent lights, no stark white walls. Instead, the space was designed for luxury. Dim chandeliers, dark oak furniture, and a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. And in the center of it all, lying motionless in a pristine white bed, was Logan Hayes. Akira stepped closer, letting her gaze settle on him. His complexion was pale from months of immobility, yet his features remained striking. Sharp jawline, dark lashes resting against his colorless skin. If not for the countless tubes and monitors surrounding him, he could have simply been a man in a deep slumber. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself as she began her work, checking the IV, monitoring his heart rate, adjusting his pillows. Then, finally, she dipped a washcloth into warm water and gently wiped his face. The moment her fingertips brushed against his skin, a strange sensation ran down her spine. It felt like he could feel her. She let out a soft laugh, shaking off the absurd thought. "I guess you don't get a say in this, huh?" she murmured as she carefully cleaned his hands. "Silence?" She smiled. "I'll take that as a yes." Day after day, Akira followed the same routine. But then, the unthinkable happened. She noticed a movement, faint but undeniable. First a slight twitch of his fingers, then the barest shift when she adjusted his pillow. At first, she convinced herself it was just muscle reflex, but as it happened again and again, a terrifying yet thrilling realization struck her. He was trying to wake up. Akira couldn't stop thinking about the tiny movements she had witnessed. At first, she tried to convince herself that they were nothing, just involuntary muscle reflexes. But as they became more frequent, she knew she couldn't ignore them anymore. She reported it to Dr. Mitchell, but he only shook his head. "It could just be natural spasms," he said. "I don't want you getting your hopes up." But Akira knew something was different. Then, on an otherwise normal morning, as she carefully wiped Logan's skin with a warm cloth, it happened. His hand tightened around her wrist. Akira froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She glanced down, her pulse pounding in her ears. His fingers were wrapped weakly around her wrist. Not a random twitch, not an unconscious movement, but a response. Her heart slammed against her ribs. And then, Logan's eyes opened. A soft glow from the room's dim lighting reflected off his deep ocean blue irises. They were dazed, unfocused, but alive. The basin of water slipped from her grasp, crashing onto the pristine floor. But she didn't care. "Oh my God!" She stumbled back, hands shaking. Logan's lips parted slightly. A raspy, broken sound escaped. "Where?" His voice was weak, barely a whisper. Akira slammed her hand against the emergency button. Within seconds, the door burst open. A team of doctors and nurses rushed in, Dr. Mitchell leading them. His eyes widened in disbelief. "What happened?" he demanded, already checking Logan's vitals. Akira's voice was shaky. He grabbed my hand. Then he opened his eyes. The room exploded into motion. Machines beeping, nurses adjusting equipment, doctors running tests. But Akira couldn't look away. Logan was still watching her. His gaze was hazy, filled with confusion, but also something familiar. Slowly, she reached out, hesitating before resting her hand on his. "Do you remember anything?" she whispered. Logan blinked. Silence stretched between them. Then his fingers curled around hers. "No, but I feel like I should." A shiver ran down Akira's spine. Because even though Logan Hayes didn't know her, somewhere deep inside him he knew. Logan was awake, but his mind was a blank slate. He couldn't remember the accident, his family, and most importantly, he couldn't remember himself. The doctors assured him that memory loss was common in long-term coma patients. But the more they pressed him to recall something, the more frustrated and lost he became. "Try to remember, Logan," Dr. Mitchell urged during an evaluation. "Anything at all." Logan shut his eyes, forcing himself to dig deeper. A flash of something, a dark road, heavy rain pelting against the windshield, and headlights blinding him. His fingers clenched. "I remember," his voice was hoarse. "Something felt wrong." Akira, who had been silently standing by his side, gripped the edge of the chair. "Wrong? What do you mean?" Logan took a shaky breath, eyes narrowing as he tried to piece the fragments together. "I was driving at night. I remember heavy rain." He hesitated, his chest rising and falling. "And then someone was there, standing by the road, watching me." Akira went rigid. "Watching you?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan nodded. "I couldn't see their face, but something was off. And then my car lost control." A cold chill ran down Akira's spine. Logan's accident had always been dismissed as a tragic malfunction. Brakes failing, losing control, crashing off the road. But now his words made one thing alarmingly clear. This wasn't an accident. She couldn't shake the eerie feeling clawing at her chest. That night, unable to let it go, she returned to the hospital archives and re-examined his case file. And then she saw it. The forensic accident report. According to investigators, Logan's brakes hadn't simply failed, they had been deliberately tampered with. Her hands trembled as she turned the final page. Someone had wanted Logan dead. She looked up, heart pounding. Logan had no idea, but she had to tell him. Akira didn't sleep that night. Someone had tried to kill Logan. But who and why? The next morning, she found Logan still struggling to come to terms with his lost memories. But no matter how hard it was, he needed to know the truth. She placed a file in front of him. "You need to see this." Logan hesitated before flipping it open. His eyes skimmed the words. Then they froze. "Brakes tampered." His fists clenched, muscles tightening. "You're telling me? Someone did this to me?" Akira swallowed hard. "This wasn't just an accident, Logan. Someone wanted you dead." A quiet storm brewed in his deep blue eyes. Who? That was the question haunting them both. And the answer lay within HayesTech's financial records. Akira and Logan spent hours combing through company transactions. Then they found it. A large sum of money wired to a known criminal with a history of orchestrating staged crashes. The sender? Derek Hayes. Logan's world tilted. "No," he whispered. Derek Hayes, his half-brother, the man who had always lived in his shadow, the man who had spent his entire life resenting Logan, for the company, for their father's favor, for everything. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. His half-brother, the man he had trusted despite their differences. Why? And then the memories started piecing themselves together. Pouring rain, blinding headlights. A figure standing by the road, watching him. Logan clenched his fists, his breathing uneven. "I remember," he whispered. Akira leaned in. "What do you remember?" Logan exhaled shakily. That night, I left a meeting with Derek. We fought. He looked up, voice dark. He said I didn't deserve the company, that I only had it because of our father. Then, the flashes came sharper. Derek had left first. Logan had gone to the parking lot, feeling a nagging sense of something being off. But he had ignored it. He got in his car, he drove, and then his brakes failed. Akira's breath hitched. Are you sure? Logan nodded, his expression turning ice cold. Derek planned this. He left early on purpose so he wouldn't be suspected. Akira's hands balled into fists. We need to confront him. But they couldn't let him know they were onto him. So they set a trap. Akira called Derek, pretending to be one of Logan's doctors. She told him Logan was showing significant memory recovery and needed a family member to help trigger more memories. And, just as expected, Derek took the bait. Derek stepped into the hospital room with an air of forced warmth. Logan, he smiled, you're finally awake. I was so worried. Logan tilted his head, watching the man he once called his brother. Were you? His voice was unreadable. Derek pulled up a chair, his expression full of false sympathy. Of course, I visited you all the time. Akira, standing silently in the corner, watched him like a hawk. Really? Logan leaned back. Strange, because I don't remember ever seeing you here. Derek's smile faltered just slightly before he recovered. Well, the company was struggling after your accident, he sighed. I had to take on a lot of responsibility. Logan observed him. I bet you didn't mind that. Derek let out a short laugh. Of course not. That's what family is for. Akira's fists clenched. He was such a good liar. Logan took a slow breath. Derek, my memory, it's coming back. Derek froze. Is that so? Logan nodded, eyes locked on him. That night, I remember the rain. I remember arguing with someone. The tension thickened. Derek tried to stay relaxed. And I remember someone standing by the road watching me as my car lost control. Derek's shoulders stiffened. Maybe you imagined it, he said lightly. Logan narrowed his eyes. Then how do you explain my brakes being tampered with? Derek went still. I have no idea what you're talking about. Drop the act, Akira said coldly. We have proof. The money transfer. Your name is on it. Derek exhaled sharply, as if he was finally too exhausted to pretend. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Why? He let out a bitter chuckle. You really don't get it, do you, Logan? He looked at Logan, eyes dark with resentment. I've spent my whole life in your shadow. You were the golden boy, Dad's favorite. His jaw clenched. And me? I had to work twice, 3 times as hard, just to be acknowledged. His voice turned sharp, but no matter what I did, Dad only ever looked at you, the company. It should have been mine. Logan felt a chill creep down his spine. Derek smirked. I didn't plan to get rid of you so soon. But you wouldn't step down. You wouldn't break. His gaze darkened. So I decided to help you. And then the door burst open. 2 officers stepped inside. Derek Hayes, one announced. You're under arrest for attempted murder. Derek spun around, panic flashing in his eyes. What? Akira crossed her arms. Did you really think we invited you here just to talk? Derek looked around desperately. Logan, we're brothers. Logan stepped forward, meeting his gaze. Not anymore. And as Derek was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming his last desperate pleas, Logan knew it was finally over. After everything, Logan could finally breathe again. Derek was gone. Justice had been served. But as the chaos faded, he realized something even more important than revenge. Someone who had never left his side. Akira. When the world turned its back on him, she stayed. When he was trapped between life and death, she didn't give up on him. And that night, under the quiet glow of the moon, Logan finally said what he had wanted to say all along. They strolled through the hospital garden, where the night air was crisp, and the soft glow of lanterns lined the cobblestone path. No more beeping machines, no sterile white walls, just the two of them. "Akira," Logan's deep voice broke the silence. She turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the gentle lights around them. "Yeah?" He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have gotten a second chance at life." Akira froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. "I don't just mean waking up," Logan continued. "I mean me. You didn't just help me survive, Akira. You helped me find myself again." Her heart skipped a beat. She had spent so much time keeping her emotions in check. Ever since Logan woke up, she reminded herself that she was just his nurse, that she couldn't allow feelings to cloud her judgment. But now, as he looked at her like this, she knew she couldn't lie to herself anymore. Logan's hand reached out, gently closing around hers. "I don't know who I was before," he admitted, voice low, "but I do know one thing. I want you to be part of my life." Akira stared at him, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. And then she squeezed his hand back, not pulling away. There was nothing else to say. Under the soft glow of the moon, something new, something undeniable had begun. A few months later, Logan Hayes had made a full recovery. He returned as the CEO of HayesTech, reclaiming his place at the top, but this time he wasn't the same man. He was no longer just a ruthless businessman who lived for his work, because now he had something far more important. Akira. That evening, Logan took Akira to the rooftop of a high-rise building where the city lights stretched endlessly below them. A beautifully set table awaited them, glowing candles, red wine, and a bouquet of white roses. Akira's eyes widened at the breathtaking sight. "Logan, what is all this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. He smiled softly. "Dinner, just you and me." They sat together, sharing a quiet, intimate moment, something rare in their chaotic lives. But all throughout the evening, Logan couldn't stop looking at her, as if he wanted to remember this moment forever. And then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he stood up and stepped toward her. Akira's heartbeat quickened as Logan dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. She sucked in a breath as the ring inside caught the golden light, a stunning, elegant diamond, simple yet perfect. Logan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening slightly around the velvet box. "Akira," his voice was steady, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You didn't just save my life. You became my reason to keep living." Her breath caught, her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the ring. The world around them seemed to blur, the city lights turning into distant stars. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Logan waited, silent, hopeful, vulnerable. Then Akira laughed softly, tears glistening in her eyes. She nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." Logan chuckled, sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. And as the city lights shimmered around them, they both knew this was only the beginning of their forever. That day, the sky was a perfect shade of blue, as if the universe itself was blessing their union. The grand garden of the estate was adorned with white roses, sunlight filtering through the trees, casting a golden glow over the elegantly decorated seating. Twinkling fairy lights hung from the branches, creating a scene straight out of a fairy tale. As Akira stepped down the petal-strewn aisle, all eyes were on her, but she only saw one person, Logan. He stood at the altar, dressed in a classic black tuxedo, but it wasn't his attire that took her breath away. It was the way he looked at her, like a man who had found everything he had ever searched for. Step by step, she moved toward him, toward her forever. Before their loved ones, they exchanged their vows. When it was Logan's turn, he held her hands tightly, his deep blue eyes shimmering with raw emotion. "I once thought I had everything," he murmured, "but now I know everything only began when I found you." Tears glistened in Akira's eyes as the officiant declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Logan pulled her into a deep kiss, as cheers and applause erupted around them. And in that moment, they both knew this was the beginning of a new life, one filled not with loss, but with love and endless hope.